Have you ever noticed how the people you love can sometimes surprise you in the most unexpected ways? What if one simple request changed the way you looked at your family, your life, and even yourself? Tonight, I want to share something very personal, something I never thought I'd talk about, but it's a story worth telling because it might touch your heart the way it touched mine. Tell me, from which city are you watching us tonight? Write it down in the comments. I'd love to know. My name is Laura. I'm 52 years old, and I never thought I'd be sitting here reflecting on late-night talks with my son. But life has its ways of surprising us, doesn't it? It started out small, almost unnoticeable. Every evening, just before bedtime, my son, Daniel, who's 24, would peek his head into the living room and ask, "Mom, can we just sit for a little while?" At first, I thought it was sweet, almost like he was holding on to pieces of his childhood. You know how sons grow up so fast. One moment they're asking for bedtime stories, and the next they're taller than you, with their own lives and responsibilities. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to find it a little unusual. Why every night? Why this sudden craving for my time? Still, I couldn't deny the warmth in his eyes, the softness in his voice, and the way he would wait until I set aside whatever I was doing. One evening, I remember sitting on the couch with a cup of chamomile tea, the house dim except for the golden glow of the lamp beside me. Daniel walked in quietly, like he didn't want to disturb me, but I knew he was there before he even spoke. It's a mother's instinct. You feel your child's presence like the warmth of sunlight on your skin. "Mom," he said gently, "do you mind if I sit with you?" I nodded, smiling, and patted the space beside me. He lowered himself onto the couch, close enough that I could hear his steady breathing. For a while, neither of us said anything. We just sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional car passing by outside. That silence spoke louder than words. It carried a weight, a kind of unspoken need. And I began to realize this wasn't just about sitting together. This was about connection, about something he couldn't quite put into words yet. As I looked at him, I couldn't help but think back to when he was a boy. His hair would fall into his eyes the same way it does now, though back then it was lighter, almost golden under the sun. He used to ask me endless questions about the stars, about why people cry, about whether dreams were real. And now here he was, a grown man, asking me for time. "Is everything all right?" I asked, finally, my voice soft, careful not to break the fragile air between us. Daniel hesitated, his gaze fixed on his hands. "Yeah," he said, but it wasn't convincing. Then he added, I feel better when we talk, when I'm around you." Those words wrapped around my heart like a blanket on a cold night. They were simple, but filled with something deeper, something I couldn't yet name. So I leaned back, letting the moment linger. "All right then," I whispered. "We'll sit. We'll talk." That night, he told me about work, the stress, the pressure to perform, the fear of making mistakes. He told me about how sometimes the world felt too heavy, and how coming home and seeing me grounded him, reminded him he wasn't alone. I listened, really listened. I didn't try to fix it, didn't try to tell him what to do. Sometimes, the most powerful gift you can give is silence, paired with presence. And in those moments, I could feel the years of motherhood shifting, no longer about guiding a child, but about supporting a man. When he finally got up to go to bed, he smiled, a little shyly, and said, "Thanks, Mom." I didn't ask for thanks. I didn't need it. But I'll never forget how genuine it sounded, how his voice carried both relief and gratitude. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was happy, grateful that my son trusted me enough to come to me night after night, but another part of me wondered, why now? Why this sudden need? Was he hiding something deeper? The questions lingered, but I knew one thing for certain. These moments, however strange, were precious. And maybe, just maybe, they were teaching me something new about love. The nights kept coming, and with them, Daniel's quiet request. Every evening, almost like clockwork, he would appear, sometimes leaning against the doorway, sometimes just standing silently until I noticed him. It became our ritual, one that I didn't plan, but one that slowly became the highlight of my day. I have to admit, though, I was puzzled. Mothers know when something sits beneath the surface, like a current under still water. I could feel it in his pauses, in the way his eyes would sometimes wander when I asked simple questions. He wasn't just seeking comfort, he was holding something inside. One evening, after a long day of chores, I lit a single candle on the coffee table. The soft flicker painted the room with shadows that danced against the walls. It was peaceful, almost sacred. I was about to pick up my book when Daniel appeared again, this time looking more tired than usual. His shoulders slumped, his hair messy, like he had been running his hand through it all day. "Hard day?" I asked. He nodded, then dropped onto the couch beside me, his body sinking into the cushions as though they were the only solid thing holding him up. "You could say that," he murmured. For a moment, I studied his face. The boy I once knew was still there, hidden beneath the rough edges of adulthood. But there was something else, too, an ache he wasn't ready to share. We sat in silence, the kind of silence that speaks more than words ever could. Then, almost unexpectedly, he said, "Mom, do you ever feel like you're carrying too much, but you can't tell anyone because they wouldn't understand?" His voice cracked slightly at the edges. My heart tightened. I reached over and placed my hand on his, warm, steady, reassuring. "Yes," I said softly, "more times than I can count." That seemed to surprise him. His eyes lifted to mine, searching, as if to see whether I really meant it. "You?" he asked. "You always seem so strong." I smiled, though there was sadness behind it. Strong doesn't mean unbroken, Daniel. It just means you keep walking, even when the road feels heavy. He let out a breath, almost like a sigh of relief, and leaned back. For the first time in a long while, he opened up, not fully, not yet, but enough to show me the edges of his burden. He spoke of pressure at work, the endless deadlines, the feeling of being measured against impossible expectations. He confessed how sometimes, late at night, he lay awake worrying about the future, wondering if he was good enough. I listened, nodding, my hand still resting on his. "You don't have to carry it all alone," I whispered. "That's what I'm here for." Those words seemed to settle something inside him. His shoulders eased, his breathing steadied, and then he said something I'll never forget. "You know, Mom, when I sit with you, I feel like I can breathe, like I'm safe again." Safe again. The phrase echoed in my heart long after he said it. How fragile we all are, no matter our age, and how deeply we crave the presence of someone who sees us, not for what we do, but for who we are. That night, when he finally went to bed, I lingered in the living room long after the candle had burned out. The room smelled faintly of wax and warmth, and I found myself reflecting on the strange beauty of what was happening between us. I realized something important. Motherhood doesn't end when your child becomes an adult. It changes shape. It becomes less about guiding and more about holding, less about teaching and more about listening. But still, in the back of my mind, the question lingered. Why now? What had stirred this need in him? I tried not to dwell on it, but deep down, I knew a truth was waiting, quietly, like a seed in the soil, ready to break through when the time was right. And until that time came, I promised myself this: I would be here, every night, no matter how tired, no matter how busy. Because if my son was reaching out, then I would answer. Always. Little did I know, those quiet evenings were leading us towards a revelation that would change both of us in ways I could never have imagined. The weeks turned into a rhythm I could no longer imagine my evenings without. Each night, Daniel would come in with that familiar, hesitant look, and each night I would set aside everything to be with him. The living room had taken on a new feeling, a private sanctuary, a place where words and silence carried the same weight. One particular evening, the air was thick with the scent of autumn. The wind rattled the window panes, and a chill crept in despite the heater humming softly in the corner. I had a cup of warm tea in my hands, and Daniel sank into the couch beside me, as usual. But tonight, something in his demeanor was different. He was quieter than usual, almost restless, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his sleeve. "Mom," he said finally, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Can I tell you something?" I nodded, a little instinctively. "Of course, Daniel. You can tell me anything." He shifted slightly, and I noticed the way his eyes darted toward the floor, then back to me, searching. It was the kind of look that held both vulnerability and a deep trust, a silent plea for understanding. He started, then stopped, as if the words were stuck in his throat. I reached over, placing my hand on his knee, just as I always did. "Take your time. You don't have to rush." He swallowed hard, then finally met my eyes. "I guess I've been feeling lost, in a way. Not just about work, not just about life, but about myself, about who I'm supposed to be. And I realized that the only place I feel grounded, the only place I feel safe is here, with you." My chest tightened. I wanted to speak, to reassure him, but I also knew that this was his moment. His courage to open up was fragile, delicate, and I needed to honor that. "I never meant to make it weird," he added quickly, almost as if apologizing for exposing himself. "It's just, I don't have anyone else I can talk to like this." I smiled gently, squeezing his knee. "Daniel, you can always talk to me. Always. There's nothing strange about needing someone you love." He nodded, and for a long while we just sat together, the storm outside echoing the quiet turbulence inside. I realized then that his need wasn't just for comfort, but for understanding, for validation, for the kind of unconditional acceptance only a mother can give. And yet, beneath it all, I sensed there was more, something he wasn't saying, some deeper thread that he hadn't untangled yet. That night, as I watched him leave for bed, a part of me felt a pang of curiosity, tinged with concern. I knew there was a truth waiting, hidden just below the surface, and I had to be patient until he was ready. Over the following days, I noticed subtle changes in him. He seemed quieter at work when I called him, almost hesitant to mention anything outside our evenings. And when he arrived each night, there was an intensity to his presence, a weight behind his eyes that I couldn't ignore. Then one night, as we sat in our usual spot with the city lights flickering through the window, Daniel finally broke the barrier I had been sensing for weeks. "Mom," he whispered, voice trembling, I I've been struggling with something for a long time, and it's hard to explain, but I need you to know I trust you more than anyone, and I feel safe enough to tell you." My heart raced. I leaned closer, encouraging him with my presence, my hand resting lightly on his arm. "I'm listening, Daniel. Whatever it is, I'm here for you." He closed his eyes briefly as if summoning the courage, and then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "It's like all my life, I've been trying to prove myself to the world, trying to be someone I'm not, someone I think I should be. And every night when I sit with you, I can just be me. And I don't want to lose that." There it was, the hidden truth I had sensed. It wasn't just a need for company or comfort or casual conversation. It was a craving for connection, for authenticity, for the simple, unshakable bond between mother and son that never faded even as he grew into adulthood. Tears pricked at my eyes, not of sadness, but of awe and deep love. This wasn't just a moment of revelation, it was a turning point. The fear, the struggle, the quiet desperation he had carried was finally being shared, and I felt privileged, honored to be the one he turned to. I reached over and took both his hands in mine. "Daniel," I whispered, voice steady despite the emotion swelling inside me, "you will never lose this. We'll figure it out together, always." He nodded, a fragile smile breaking across his face, and I could see the tension in his body begin to ease. That night, our silence was different. It was not the quiet of uncertainty, but the calm of understanding, of two hearts finding reassurance in one another. And as I lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, I reflected on the journey we were on. I realized that sometimes love asks for patience. Sometimes it demands that you simply be present. And sometimes it reveals itself in ways you never anticipated, quietly, gently, and profoundly. That night, I knew one thing for certain. No matter what came next, our bond had deepened, transformed into something both sacred and unbreakable, and I was ready to face whatever truths would come with him, hand in hand, heart to heart. The nights had changed us both. What began as small, quiet requests from Daniel had grown into something profound, a nightly ritual that became a lifeline not just for him, but for me too. Each evening, as the city lights shimmered through the windows and the soft hum of life outside reached our ears, I felt a sense of closeness I hadn't realized I was missing. That night, as I prepared our usual tea, I felt a subtle anticipation. Daniel walked in with his familiar, hesitant smile, but there was a steadiness to him now, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He sat down, and we shared a brief, knowing glance. No words were needed at first. The comfort was mutual, the bond palpable. We talked, as we always did, about work, life, and the quiet fears that surfaced at night. But tonight there was an openness, a willingness to go deeper, to explore the things left unspoken. His voice was calm, yet layered with emotion, and I could sense him trusting me with the most vulnerable parts of himself. "Mom," he said softly, "I've been thinking about how much these nights mean to me, how much they've helped me understand myself, and you." I smiled, heart swelling. "I feel the same way, Daniel. These moments, they're ours. They always will be." He looked at me for a long time, and I could see the gratitude and love reflected in his eyes. The weight he had carried for months, perhaps years, seemed lighter, softened by the simple act of sharing it with someone who truly understood. I never thought I'd need this so much, not just the talks, but the feeling of being seen, of being accepted for who I really am. Tears pricked my eyes. You've always been seen, Daniel. I've always known who you are, even when you didn't. The room was quiet then. The only sound, the faint ticking of the clock and the soft rustle of the evening wind. But the silence was not empty. It was full of understanding, of connection, of love that had matured into something almost sacred. As I reached over to hold his hand, I felt the full depth of our bond. It was no longer just mother and son in the traditional sense. It had become a partnership of trust, a sanctuary where vulnerability was met with acceptance. We had crossed a threshold together, not through grand gestures, but through consistent presence, patience, and quiet empathy. I think, Daniel said slowly, that what I needed all along was someone to remind me that it's okay to just be me, that I don't have to pretend. And I'm so grateful it's you. My heart ached with love, and I'm grateful it's you, Daniel. Life gives us these moments, these little windows of clarity and closeness. We just have to recognize them, cherish them. The candle flickered between us, casting shadows that danced gently along the walls. I could feel a warmth spreading through me, a sense of fulfillment I hadn't known I was seeking. This wasn't just about comfort or reassurance. It was about mutual discovery, about understanding that true connection doesn't fade with age or circumstance, but evolves into something deeper and richer. As the night drew on, Daniel rose to leave, but paused, turning to me. "Good night, Mom," he said, his voice steady but tender. "Good night, Daniel," I replied, squeezing his hand. "Sleep well." Later, as I lay in bed, I reflected on everything that had happened. The quiet evenings, the shared confessions, the emotional closeness. They had changed me as much as him. I had discovered patience I didn't know I had, empathy that deepened with every conversation, and a renewed sense of purpose in simply being present. I realized that love, in its most powerful form, is not about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It's in the consistent presence, in the willingness to listen, in the courage to be vulnerable and to accept vulnerability in return. And I also understood something else, that relationships, even between mother and adult child, are ever evolving. They require attention, care, and sometimes the courage to confront emotions you never expected to face. But when nurtured, they can transform into something profoundly beautiful, something that leaves a lasting imprint on your heart. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of calm and completeness. Daniel's journey towards understanding himself had intertwined with mine in ways neither of us could have predicted, and together we had built a sanctuary of trust, love, and quiet intimacy. I knew that tomorrow and every night after, our connection would continue to grow. And in that knowledge, I found peace, a deep, abiding peace that comes from love fully given and fully received. The world outside could remain chaotic and uncertain, but within our little living room, surrounded by the soft glow of the lamp and the lingering scent of tea and autumn air, everything felt exactly as it should. We had found each other, truly, in ways that transcended words, in ways that would carry us both forward for the rest of our lives.